The Lean CEO. Leading the way to world-class excellence. The summary in brief. As organizations strive to do more with less, many are turning to lean methodology, which is based on the same techniques that propelled the legendary turnaround of Japan's industrial sector after World War II. The Lean CEO reveals the true power of Lean through in-depth interviews with CEOs who have gone beyond tool adoption and established Lean as a corporate-wide management system. The CEOs tell in their own words how they applied Lean management to deliver sustainable financial results, empower and motivate employees, break down internal silos and build solid partnerships with customers and suppliers. Their testimony provides a goldmine of practical advice for managers in lean and non-lean organizations alike, as they share their personal insights on topics such as leading and empowering people, building transparency and trust, tuning into the customer experience and creating a learning organization. Thoughtful, sometimes brutally frank, these leaders challenge many of the sacred cows of traditional business, such as standard cost accounting, hierarchical management, emphasis on large batches and our obsession with data and computers. Citing numerous examples from their experiences, they provide a fresh view of today's business challenges and a positive roadmap for any organization that is striving for excellence. Introduction. One of the most promising developments in modern business history has been the emergence of the global lean movement, which was founded on the practices that vaulted Japan to manufacturing stardom in the late 1970s. Today, the lean approach has a track record for helping organizations do more with less, and it is rapidly gaining ground in non-industrial sectors such as healthcare, government and financial services. Lean's true potential to build world-class performance depends on a commitment to continuous improvement that involves every worker in the organization and requires uncommon discipline and persistence. The basic tenets of Lean, moreover, challenge many aspects of traditional management theory and call for a mindset that is foreign to most executives. Lean is therefore a rough sell in the boardroom, and CEOs who actively lead Lean transformations are the exception rather than the rule. How waste became business as usual. Take a look at the following three scenarios. A recreational trailer manufacturer was forced into bankruptcy after revenues dropped 60% during the 2009 recession. A medium-sized hospital closed its doors amid rising costs, quality concerns and growing competition from larger providers. A manufacturer of diesel engine components, dogged by chronic delivery problems, poor labor relations and the loss of a key patent, shut down its plant and sold its assets to a large automotive manufacturer. Scenarios like these are, sadly, not unusual. However, these three scenarios never happened. In each case, the CEO defied the odds after discovering and adopting Lean. The results were astonishing. The organizations excelled, not only in terms of financial performance, but also in areas such as employee engagement, customer satisfaction and influence in the business community. To see the waste, the Lean CEOs turned much of their attention to an aspect of the organization that is neglected in modern business theory, so much so that we don't have a name for it. The Japanese, however, do have a word, gemba, which means the real place. In the Lean context, this means the place where people create a product or service that customers pay for. In an automotive factory, for example, gemba is the shop floor where people make cars. In a school, gemba is the classroom where teachers help students learn. Through the Lean lens, everything else, administration, finance, human resources, sales and even senior management, is there to support gemba. Respect for the people who spend their days in gemba is one of the cornerstones of Lean. It is through their initiative that the breakthrough gains that characterize successful Lean transformations are achieved. To empower this kind of participation, managers need to quickly rid themselves of the illusion that they know all the answers. On the contrary, Lean CEOs must be constantly inquiring and must do so openly. Neglect of gemba and the people who work in it is behind many of the failures we hear about. To understand how managers became blind to the widespread waste in modern organizations, we have to look back in history. The miracle of mass production. The American industrial golden age began when Henry Ford opened his first factory in 1908. It took several years to perfect the production system, but by the time it was fully operational, the Ford Motor Company was producing cars 10 times as fast as its competitors, and costs were declining rapidly. A leading figure in industrial management at the time was Frederick Taylor, and his work defined the field for much of the 20th century. Taylor's main preoccupation was cost reduction, and his reputation as a cost cutter became legendary. Taylor believed that for every task, there was one best way and promised that managers who applied his theories could determine this and scientifically supply all the intelligence needed to run an organization. The key tool for cutting costs was a concept called division of labor. The idea is to subdivide work into simple repetitive tasks, each of which can be performed by a worker with minimal education. Thus, an organization can assign work to the lowest paid workers. Taylor was a strong proponent of the idea that all the thinking should be done by managers. "You are not supposed to think," he is alleged to have told workers. "There are people paid for thinking around here." Workers were treated like interchangeable cogs in a machine whose only interest was their paychecks. In this way of thinking, the machine was the ideal worker. As machinery took over more and more of the workload, the correlation between direct labor and real product costs diminished. By 1970, America was on a roll. Factories were buying bigger and better machines and expanding their operations. However, all this had occurred under ideal conditions during the post-World War II period. Things started to change in the 1970s. National debt soared, the OPEC oil embargo resulted in long lines at gas stations, unemployment jumped and inflation was rising. There is one domestic problem that all 1980 presidential contenders, including the incumbent, preach against: the disturbing decline in U.S. productivity, wrote Claire Crawford Mason, an NBC TV producer. Crawford Mason contacted W. Edwards Deming to discuss the issue, and this turned into one of the most successful news documentaries in the history of television, titled "If Japan Can, Why Can't We?" At the time, Deming was an 80-year-old statistics professor who was virtually unknown in the United States. The buzz following the show's airing kick-started a flurry of activity in the West that became known as the Quality Movement. Organizations established or grew their quality departments, consultants began to package and teach statistical quality control methods and production techniques from Japan, became the latest fashion. Deming had warned, however, that the road to industrial leadership would demand a lot more than add-ons to existing management practices. His definition of total quality, in fact, called for no less than a fundamental overhaul of the way companies manage people. Lean, a radical new approach to production. By the end of World War II, Allied bombing had systematically destroyed much of Japan's industrial capability, forcing many manufacturers, including the Toyota Motor Corporation, to suspend operations. It was under these dire circumstances that Kaichiro Toyota, Toyota's founding CEO, issued his most famous directive. "Catch up with America in 3 years," he said, "or the automobile industry in Japan will not survive." Kaichiro started the Toyota Motor Company in 1933, holding a set of values, central to which was the duty to serve the people of Japan. There was also a sense of obligation to employees, which included a philosophy of lifetime employment. Toyota admired Ford's determination to reduce waste and was greatly inspired by the continuous flow established in Ford's assembly lines, whereby all materials, labor, and production equipment converged on the workplace exactly when they were needed. Toyota coined the term just-in-time (JIT) to describe this ideal state, and this became one of the pillars of his company and the lean movement that followed. One employee who took Toyota's mandate to heart was a young engineer named Taiichi Ono. Following Kaichiro Toyota's directive, Ono began to reflect on what it would actually take to catch up with the United States. Just-in-time means that, in a flow process, the right parts needed in assembly reach the assembly line at the time they are needed and only in the amount needed. Pursuing this ideal state, Ono realized, could serve as a powerful guiding principle for reducing waste. Each time a barrier to continuous flow was removed, waste would be automatically eliminated along with it, and efficiency would therefore be improved. The 7 wastes in the Toyota production system, Ono put waste in the spotlight with the following formula: present capacity equals work plus waste. He went on to list 7 categories of waste, which became known in the lean world as the 7 wastes. 1. Overproduction, producing more than required by the next downstream process or the customer. Ono saw this as the cardinal sin of waste because essentially it forces all the other wastes. 2. Time on hand, waiting, workers standing idle awaiting what is required for their next work. 3. Transportation, excessive movement of the workpiece or parts. 4. Overprocessing, more than the necessary amount of work being done on the workpiece, perhaps because of poor process design or defective tools. 5. Inventory, more finished goods, works in process, parts or raw materials than required by customer demand. 6. Movement, unnecessary movements by workers, including bending, straining, and walking to procure tools or parts. 7. Defects, fabrication of a defective workpiece that will later require correction. Ono sensed that there was an enormous amount of waste in any manufacturing system, as much as 50%. He also suspected that this might be the key to catching up with American automakers. Just-in-time called for an uncommon level of teamwork and discipline. Supervisors became coaches who removed barriers and helped workers understand and improve their work processes. Toyota encouraged worker suggestions through a program called the Creative Idea Suggestion System, which was launched in 1951, and the broader role of workers included maintaining their own equipment. Ono also incorporated the concept of judoka. If circumstances prevented a worker from completing standard work within the allotted time, or if there was a safety issue, it was the worker's responsibility to ensure that the problem was resolved on the spot. This was initiated by pulling the andan, Japanese for lantern, a cord or lever that activated a signal light that instantly escalated the problem to a supervisor. If the problem was not resolved immediately, the supervisor pulled the andan, directing all others on the line to cease work. Judoka was considered so important that Ono named it as one of the two pillars of the Toyota production system, with just-in-time being the other. To manage the environment so that everything was synchronized and regulated, Ono used a series of visual methods that gave workers instant cues about relevant activity in their environment. At the heart of this was a communication system called Kanban. Kanban relayed the pull signal, or the trigger, to produce sequentially to all the production stages, starting with the final process and progressing back to the first. Implementing Kanban throughout the Toyota facilities was a huge undertaking that took years to complete. To support visual management, Ono enforced measures to create an orderly, clutter-free environment where visual cues could remain clear and unobstructed. Today, lean companies use a conceptual tool called fives to create such an environment. If all that has been described here sounds like an impossible high-wire act, then you have understood it correctly. Perfecting a working environment that follows the Toyota production system takes years of hard work, much of it trial and error, and calls for extraordinary discipline from every manager, engineer, supervisor and worker. This is an all-hands-on-deck journey that never ends. West meets East in the unbelievable. By the 1980s, the roles had reversed, American manufacturers were struggling, and Japan had become the shining model. In 1991, Art Byrne assumed the role of CEO of Wiremold, an electrical components manufacturer outside Hartford, Connecticut. In one of his first conversations with the company's vice president of finance, Orest Fayum, he told him that the standard cost approach of the company was terrible and it had to go. The problem Byrne and Fayum had with standard cost accounting is that it drives decisions on the basis of past information, the proverbial managing through the rearview mirror approach. Furthermore, because it is driven by algorithms rather than real data, it often instills the wrong kind of thinking and, even worse, the wrong kind of action. Art Byrne, standard cost accounting drives companies to make things in big batches, and they absorb the overhead based on either the hours of the machines or the man-hours. And so what you find in most of those companies is near the end of the month or near the end of the quarter, people will be running machines that they don't need to run at all. They don't have any orders for the product, but that product has the most absorption hours in it, and they want to make the financial month, and they'll do things like that all the time. And so the fact is that by running them, all you are doing is building up inventory. This kind of formulaic thinking has very little connection with customer value. Art Byrne, if you walk out on a shop floor, you can't tell if you're ahead or behind. The customer is never present in a traditional manufacturing company. Instead of the customer being present, you have a forecast for the end of the month. So people spend their time trying to make the forecast, even though it is not correct most of the time. Byrne wanted to create an environment where his managers could monitor their real costs on a weekly or even a daily basis and make timely decisions that were based on how they could best help the bottom line of the company. Art Byrne, you're trying to improve the business moving forward. So when you want to establish targets, I think the most important thing is to try to pick those things that are going to have the most impact on changing the results going forward. Then run the business based on those targets. Keeping score with real numbers, working with goals and targets that were straightforward and devoid of extraneous information was the cornerstone of Byrne's management strategy. Byrne ran the wire mold business using the following 5 metrics: customer service percentage, the proportion of orders that were shipped on time; productivity, the ratio of sales to worker hours; quality, the total reduction in defects compared with the previous period; inventory turns, the ratio of cost of sales to average value of inventory; visual control, defined by the rules of fives and judged by a quality team. The lean metrics Byrne was using differ from what many managers are used to in that they apply to value streams, not to internal entities within the company, and specifically target waste in those value streams. Increasing inventory turns, for example, reduces the wasteful expense of holding inventory, thus improving the efficiency achieved in a value stream. Leading on the front lines. Being a hands-on CEO should, according to Byrne, come with the territory. Byrne is also adamant that the lean transformation has to be led from the top. One reason is that the change required is so fundamental that some things simply have to be decreed. The CEO needs to be the champion of the lean transformation, clearly articulating the direction and removing the many barriers that inevitably come up. Byrne, if you think about lean simplistically and say this is the strategy, you say I'm trying to deliver more value to my customer, and in order to do that I have to change from batching to an organization where things flow. So all we were ever really trying to do was go from batch to flow. You could always see what you needed to do. A new way out of financial crisis. Companies facing fiscal challenges are typically caught in a death spiral that is all about dollars. Creditors lose confidence and cut off the cash supply. The ability to deliver to customers weakens. Customers defect and the cycle continues. In traditionally managed companies, the primary weapon is triage guided by the company's financial statements. The company divests itself of the facilities, equipment or employees who are deemed to be creating the least profit. The information that drives these decisions, of course, comes from accounting. From a lean perspective, a key problem here is that the accounting information used to drive the decisions is only indirectly related to the activity that satisfies customer demand and makes money. Consequently, the information can be confusing, irrelevant or misleading. One of the first accountants to take practical steps to solve this disconnect was Gene Cunningham, co-author with Orest Fayum of the book Real Numbers and one of the leading voices in lean accounting. Cunningham cites several reasons why traditional accounting isn't much help in a crisis. First of all, accounting reports are delivered after the fact and do not provide timely information that can help managers make quick decisions. Financial information can also be dangerously misleading. When a company is seeing a significant drop in sales, for example, traditional financial statements can understate the seriousness of the situation because of the way unsold inventory is reported. Another dangerous blind spot is that standard cost accounting obscures the line between fixed costs and variable costs, leading to poor decisions about discontinuing product lines. Rescuing a family business from the brink. When Dan Ariens took over the leadership of his family's company, orders were declining, distributors were defecting, and the company was sitting on a growing mountain of debt. Dan Ariens, I took over the business in 1998 as the CEO, and at that point we were in need of a turnaround. I would say we were a year away from closing shop. The Ariens company began with rotary tillers and other farm equipment, and then moved to the consumer market with a line of lawn mowers and snow blowers. In the period leading up to the recession of the early 1990s, the company ran into financial difficulty. Dan Ariens, the prior CEO, had designed a bonus plan that rewarded people for absorbing more overhead, but of course this was creating income that wasn't real. I took over with a ton of inventory on hand, 2 shifts of labor running and orders shrinking. Ariens had studied lean principles and knew about the dangers of high inventories. Although his scope had been limited to plant operations, he was aware that there was more to lean than what happens on the shop floor. Dan Ariens, the light bulb for me was understanding what waste is and where it exists in organizations. It's not the waste so much in the process of making the components, it's all the other things that go around to make them ready to make the component. From the design system, to the accounting system, to the manufacturing engineering system, and the process design and the processes themselves. There are many steps before you even drill the hole. Ariens' insight that lean was about more than manufacturing was pivotal and revealed the scope of change that had to be made to save the company. Dan Jens, it was a very stressful time, and we needed that holistic approach to change the way we did business, not just the way we manufactured. So I brought lean to the whole company and really drove it hard from my vantage point and never let go. I was also very impatient with people who didn't get it. I used to say we were either going to change the people or change the people. The first efforts were in manufacturing, but the lean journey quickly began to spread from the shop floor to the offices. Workers, supervisors, and managers had built their careers by making as many pieces as possible. However, creating flow often meant that people had to slow down. The idea of scaling down production to meet demand was counterintuitive to many in the company. Dan Jens, today we have a group, and I think it's the most innovative group in this company, that's called the Jens Right Size Machine Group. Through them, we make a lot of our own manufacturing equipment. We design it to go very slowly and make one piece at a time that fits within the demand pull. While the work processes continued to improve the performance of the company, Jens had to keep the auditors and the bankers happy. Previous financial reports had many of the costs absorbed in inventory. With inventories declining and fewer labor hours, overhead appeared to be increasing. Dan Jens, our biggest challenge here was to get our auditors to understand what we were doing and to get a clean and approved audit so that we could keep banking. I think it's very difficult to bridge that gap. The hardest thing internally was being able to allocate a real expense to a real owner, for instance, having a manager who owns the cost of powdered paint so that it's not part of the overhead that flows through. As the question who's going to own that got more and more prevalent, we figured out how to quantify things like lubricants, Loctite and powder coating into our bills of materials. Another aspect of the financial management that was holding them back was the piece rate incentive system. Being able to change a 35-year-old incentive process required a lot of trust. Dan Jens, when I give talks about our lean journey, I tell people that the biggest thing is that we have built a culture around here where we trust each other. When we have that, we know that we can take some risks on making changes in our plant. People are going to have a little patience and see it through, or they're going to be part of the team that makes it all work out. Trust is such an important component to having a lean culture. Capacity without capital expenditure. Manufacturing capacity represents a significant investment in facilities, equipment, support infrastructure and salaried employees, all of which show up as fixed costs in a company's financials. Capacity utilization consequently becomes a bellwether for a company's financial health. To forestall catastrophes, companies engage in various capacity planning exercises. The idea is to do the math carefully before investing in production-related resources, weighing a variety of options, such as outsourcing, partnerships, licensing and overtime. Financial analysts use a variety of formulas to quantify the risk factors and determine precisely how much capacity it is prudent to add. The Achilles' heel in all these calculations is dependence on the dubious art of demand forecasting. When the forecast is way off, no magic formula can save the day. It is no surprise, then, that when a company is rendered insolvent by a crisis in the economy, management is likely to blame factors that nobody could have predicted. There is, of course, a very different way of approaching this, and the secret sauce in it is one of the basic tenets of lean. Instead of buying capacity, build it over time by using existing resources and investments. Identifying and eliminating waste is the method of choice for building capacity in a lean environment. As results confirm again and again, lean companies, through ongoing continuous improvement, free up significant amounts of plant space, equipment and employee hours, and then grow into that freed-up capacity. The resulting asset-light business model leaves them far less weighed down by fixed costs and consequently far more resilient in economic downturns. A realistic approach to worker motivation. One of the most common marching orders for new leaders is to address a situation that is being presented as a workforce motivation problem. Conventional wisdom in the early 1900s was that the manager-worker relationship was inherently adversarial and that the key weapons for ensuring a productive workforce were pay and threats. Psychological research since that time has shown that human motivation is far more complex than that. In his famous article One More Time, How Do You Motivate Employees?, the psychologist Frederick Herzberg cited numerous studies outlining a much more comprehensive view. In his two-factor theory, Herzberg separated motivating factors from demotivating factors, which he called hygiene. True motivation, he argued, comes from conditions that cause an employee to feel challenged, trusted, recognized, valued, and able to learn and grow. The key here is that the motivators Herzberg cited are intrinsic to the work itself. Conversely, common HR motivators such as perks, shorter work hours, human relations training and employee counseling are extrinsic and consequently do not create true motivation. By these definitions, Lean creates the ideal environment for motivating workers. Recognition, variety, autonomy and the opportunity to learn are all intrinsic to the employee's role in a culture of continuous improvement. Furthermore, these aspects are not the results of an artificial intervention cooked up by an HR department or consultant, but are based on the real needs of the customer. There are, however, two important caveats. Lean is hard work, and for the magic of motivation to kick in, there has to be the authenticity that can be achieved only when senior management truly believes and is directly involved. Also, motivation is not a cure-all for every production problem. Management must be committed to listening to workers and providing the tools they need. Building collaborative management teams. What may be the most important pillar of Lean is respect for people. In mature Lean organizations, it is a given that managers are workers like their peers on the shop floor and need clear guidelines for their activities and the right tools and processes to be successful. Furthermore, managers in Lean organizations count on their superiors to help them improve and remove barriers that stand in their way. This calls for a paradigm shift in the way an organization is run. First of all, it requires a significant culture change, particularly with managers who built their careers by practicing top-down autocratic management. It also requires the removal of systemic barriers that prevent employees of all levels from succeeding. Standard cost accounting and silos, for example, prevent cross-functional teamwork and often incentivize behavior that is contrary to the interest of creating customer value. Firefighting duties and wasteful activities such as paperwork can prevent managers from spending time with and supporting their people. Lack of knowledge can be the biggest barrier. These deficiencies are far less obvious than, say, the lack of a screwdriver on an assembly line, yet they are equally debilitating. Consequently, creating an environment where managers can succeed in a predictable way is one of the most challenging tasks for a Lean CEO. Putting people first. Bob Chapman, the chairman and CEO of the St. Louis-based industrial machinery manufacturer Barry Wehmiller, initially saw Lean as another quality fad, but very quickly saw the connection between Lean and people. Jerry Solomon, VP of Finance, explains, Bob was working with a group of people on the guiding principles of leadership at the time. The one-page document lays out the company's core values, emphasizing trust, respect for individuals, teamwork and the importance of each and every employee having a meaningful role in the company. Bob came to the realization that the guiding principles of leadership are absolutely of paramount importance, but there really is no, for lack of a better word, delivery mechanism or no distribution system with which to deliver them throughout the company. And Lean was a wonderful delivery mechanism if done right. By integrating the two, we could have a sustainable model that really brings the respect for people element that is sorely missing in a lot of Lean transformations. Bob Chapman, we decided that we were going to approach Lean very differently. In fact, we decided that the word Lean gave the wrong message. Instead, we called it 3 Lira, an acronym for Living Legacy of Leadership. This reflects our principles, so we built our own process around Lean based on that idea. The vision document, subtitled The Merger of the Guiding Principles of Leadership and Lean Enterprise, reinforces the living legacy of leadership, with emphasis on pillars of Lean culture such as respect for workers, continuous improvement, cross-functional cooperation and daily communication. As Chapman points out, the vision bets strongly on the sincere desire of people to make a positive contribution in the workplace. In other words, if a company removes the barriers that prevent employees from realizing their potential, the employees will do the rest. Furthermore, Chapman is adamant that providing fulfilling work for employees must be the number one objective that trumps all others. Treating people well cannot be a means to some other end. Building the learning organization. Transforming an organization to one that truly learns and adapts is a demanding proposition for the management team. To succeed, the CEO must provide clear direction for employees and at the same time accept an atmosphere of considerable uncertainty. Piloting a ship decisively is tough when you do not know the route. One thought leader who has studied this role carefully is Kevin Meyer. Trained as an engineer, he became a lean consultant. He spent 8 years as president of Specialty Silicone Fabricators, SSF, a mid-size medical device fabricator. Although his prior experience in engineering and with medical devices gave him a good understanding of the company's processes, Meyer knew that the knowledge the employees had accumulated was critical to any strategy. Kevin Meyer, the people had much more experience with the company and the product than I did. They could come up with solutions that were better than what I could just order based on other backgrounds. Lean thinking was new to the employees, however, and Meyer needed to have them on board to move forward. Kevin Meyer, I don't think it's possible for an organization that hasn't been exposed to a lean operation to really see it. They can hear, yeah, we can reduce cycle time and waste, and all those kinds of things, but lean is one of those things you've got to experience to truly understand the power. Most of the time, I guided people and they learned. And I think the lean transformation may have taken longer because of that, but I think it became more rooted in the culture then. Conclusion. Lean sets the bar high for CEO accountability. In brief, lean CEOs are active on the front lines, are stewards of a company-wide transformation, create a culture of trust and empowerment, exercise discipline and constancy of purpose. There are many ways of explaining why lean organizations achieve extraordinary results. The two primary reasons for lean success stand out: lean brings out the best in people, and lean gets leaders in touch with reality. As organizations face the burning platforms inherent in a global economy, the community-building aspects of lean may prove to be even more important than lean's utility at cutting waste. In the end, lean is about people. As many lean CEOs have said, once people get behind a purpose, there is no limit to what they can do.